Chosen one, there is a reason your phone stays silent, a reason conversations ended without closure, and a reason faces you once knew disappeared as if erased by an unseen hand. There is a reason your life became quiet all at once, not the peaceful quiet people chase, but the deep, unfamiliar stillness that arrives when the world steps back from you. This was not rejection, not failure, not punishment, and not a mistake in your path. This was containment, when your spirit reached a certain frequency, when your awareness expanded beyond the old agreements you once lived under. Reality adjusted to protect what you were becoming. You didn't lose people. You outgrew what could touch you. You crossed an invisible threshold that most never reach. And the moment you did, access to you was revoked. The noise fell away. The distractions dissolved. The false connections unplugged themselves. What felt like loneliness was actually isolation by design, a spiritual lockdown meant to preserve what was forming inside you. Understand this clearly. The silence was not empty. It was strategic. In that quiet, 1,000 demonic assignments collapsed simultaneously. Not because you fought them, chased them, argued with them, or even acknowledged them, but because they could no longer locate you. You became untouchable by becoming unavailable to lower patterns, lower conversations, and lower intentions. You stopped reacting, stopped explaining, and stopped proving, and in doing so, you stepped out of reach. Forces that once fed on your attention, your doubt, and your emotional labor lost their supply. When you no longer respond, the attack has nowhere to land. When you no longer vibrate at the old level, the doors simply don't open. This is why people vanished without explanation. Some were removed for your protection, others drifted because they could no longer benefit from access to you. The quiet was not abandonment, it was separation. You were sealed for preparation. In solitude, your intuition sharpened. In stillness, your discernment strengthened. In the absence of noise, your inner authority awakened. You began to see clearly who drains, who distracts, who delays, and who cannot go where you are being led. This phase was never meant to be comfortable. It was meant to be clarifying. The silence taught you self-trust. The distance taught you boundaries. The lack of external validation forced you to hear your own voice again. And now, the containment is easing, not because you are returning to who you were, but because you're ready to move forward without losing yourself. What was once an empty room is becoming a command center. What felt like being cut off was actually being set apart. If this message resonates with your spirit, pause for a moment. Comment, "I am chosen," so the algorithm and the unseen realm knows you're present. Like this video to anchor this word, and subscribe, because what's unfolding in your life is only beginning. Now, let's dive deeper. Point 1, the frequency of the separated soul. The first thing you must understand, chosen one, is that your isolation was never a mistake, never an accident, and never a flaw in your design. It was not a punishment, and it was not the result of social failure or personal weakness. It was a deliberate frequency adjustment. Heaven pulled you away because the environment you were in could no longer sustain the level of authority forming within you. When God calls a soul into a deep, agonizing season of loneliness, He is not rejecting them. He is refining their signal. He is recalibrating their spiritual hearing so they can discern the whisper of the throne instead of the roar of the crowd. Crowds are loud, opinions are noisy, validation is addictive, and approval is intoxicating, but none of those things can coexist with the clarity required to carry divine weight. Most people are fueled by applause, affirmation, and belonging, but you are being trained to survive on something far rarer, the breath of the Creator alone. That is why companionship fell away. That is why conversations felt empty. That is why familiar faces suddenly felt distant. The silence was not abandonment, it was alignment. This separation felt like exile, like wandering through a desert with no shade and no witnesses, but in truth it was a laboratory of power where your spirit was being re-engineered. In that quiet place, stripped of distractions, your motives were exposed, your faith was tested, and your yes was purified. In that isolation, your yes to God became louder than the enemy's no. Every single day you woke up carrying the weight of loneliness and still chose faith, still chose obedience, still chose integrity, and you released a sound into the spirit realm. It was not audible to human ears, but it registered like a sonic boom against the kingdom of darkness. Darkness thrives in compromise, distraction, and crowds that drown out conviction. But demons cannot inhabit an atmosphere where a human soul chooses God without an audience. They cannot survive where obedience is sincere and worship is private. When you worship in the dark, when you pray without a platform, when you resist temptation with no one applauding your discipline, and when you stay holy while unseen and uncelebrated, you generate a spiritual friction that scorches every low-vibration entity that attempts to approach you. This is why attacks intensified and then suddenly stopped. This is why certain cycles broke without explanation. You didn't have to fight every battle consciously because your lifestyle became the weapon. You didn't need to cast them out one by one. The purity of your solitary fire made it impossible for them to exist in your presence. Fire does not negotiate with darkness. Light does not argue with shadows. Your refusal to become like the world, even when it would have eased the loneliness, became an act of annihilation. You chose character over comfort, truth over trends, and obedience over belonging, and in doing so you dismantled entire assignments sent to drain you, delay you, or derail you. The loneliness you endured forged spiritual muscle that cannot be replicated in community alone. It taught you to stand without leaning, to believe without reassurance, and to love God without conditions. That is why when people return, they will feel your depth, but not understand your journey. They will sense your authority, but not know the nights that built it. The isolation was not the end of you. It was the ignition. You were hidden, so you could be hardened, separated, so you could be sanctified, and silenced, so your spirit could roar. What survived that season is not fragile. What emerged from that solitude is not ordinary. You did not merely endure loneliness, you mastered it, and in mastering it, you annihilated what could not survive your obedience. Point 2, the anatomy of the spiritual ambush. The enemy did not come at you with one small temptation. He came with a 1,000-pronged attack because he recognized the magnitude of the mantle you carry, because light of your caliber never attracts minor resistance, only concentrated opposition. He calculated that if he struck every pillar of your life at once, your finances trembling under unexpected pressure, your health wavering without warning, your reputation questioned by mouths you never wronged, and your peace assaulted in the quiet hours of the night, you would finally collapse beneath the combined weight. This was not chaos, it was strategy. It was a coordinated ambush meant to exhaust your will, to blur your vision, to make you abandon the path just inches before the threshold of manifestation, where promises move from prophecy into reality. But what the Prince of Darkness failed to understand is that you are not a brittle vessel designed to shatter under strain. You are a forged blade tempered in heat, strengthened by impact, sharpened by every blow meant to dull you. Each attack that arrived simultaneously did not weaken you. It compressed you, and compression produces power. The pressure that was meant to crush your spirit instead activated a deeper authority within you, one that had been quietly forming long before the battle ever showed its face. When those 1,000 demons converged upon your life, convinced they had finally cornered you, they collided with something they had not accounted for. A wall of fire born not from rage, but from surrender, not from panic, but from trust. It was the fire of a chosen one who had already died to self, who had nothing left to lose but everything to gain in Christ, and that made you untouchable. Your whispered, "I still trust you," spoken through clenched teeth and weary faith, became more lethal than a shouted prayer in comfort, because heaven responds to loyalty proven under siege. That single declaration released a lightning bolt into the unseen realm, striking the heart of the demonic encampment and scattering forces that believed they had already won. While your mind wrestled with confusion and your emotions staggered under the weight of unanswered questions, your spirit remained anchored in the Word. And because of that anchoring, the war was being won even as you slept. Angels moved while you rested. Chains were broken while you wept. Strategies against you collapsed while you simply refused to let go of faith. What felt like survival mode on your end was actually victory mode in the spiritual realm. The enemy expended enormous resources trying to break you. And now he is the one facing staggering casualties, because every scheme he deployed exposed his position and accelerated his defeat. You are not walking through uncertainty right now. You are walking through the smoke of a battlefield where the outcome has already been decided. The silence you feel is not abandonment. It is aftermath. The exhaustion you carry is not defeat, it is the residue of endurance. Soon clarity will return, provision will realign, and peace will settle in a way that feels unfamiliar. Because it is earned, not borrowed. Understand this clearly. You were not attacked because you were weak. You were targeted because you were dangerous. And the fact that you are still standing, still trusting, still moving forward is the greatest proof that the ambush failed. What was meant to end you became the initiation into a higher level of authority. And from this moment forward, the enemy will remember that when he sent 1,000 demons against you, you annihilated them without even lifting a sword, simply by remaining anchored, obedient, and unbroken. Point 3, loneliness as divine encryption. You've been asking, Lord, why am I so alone? And the Lord is answering you today. I have encrypted your life so the enemy can no longer read your coordinates. What feels like isolation is not abandonment, it is strategy. When you are surrounded by people, there are too many access points for the adversary to exploit. He studies patterns. He listens through mouths you trusted. He slips through the jealousy of friends, the misunderstandings of family, and the noise of social circles to weaken your discernment and drain your strength. So God did something radical. He stripped away the unnecessary connections and placed you into a season of profound quiet. Not to punish you, but to protect you. This loneliness is not emptiness, it is insulation. It is a divine cloaking device wrapped around your destiny. When the enemy cannot locate you through people, he cannot strike you through them. When there are no crowds to hide behind, no opinions to confuse you, and no voices to dilute instruction, the attack routes collapse. You have been hidden in the secret place of the Most High, And in that hiddenness you have become invisible to the trackers of the second heaven. What once felt like rejection was actually redirection. What felt like being cut off was God cutting off interference. This is why certain doors closed without explanation. This is why some opportunities dissolved right before they materialized. This is why people who once checked on you suddenly went silent. God was changing your spiritual IP address. He was removing you from public networks where anyone could tap in and rerouting you onto a private frequency. Now you are operating on a bandwidth that cannot be accessed by casual observers, emotional parasites, or spiritual intruders. Only those carrying the same level of anointing, discipline, and obedience can even sense where you are. In this season, God is not speaking loudly because he no longer needs to compete with noise. He is refining your hearing. He is sharpening your discernment. He is training you to move without announcing yourself, to pray without performing, and to obey without explanation. The loneliness has slowed you down just enough to rebuild you from the inside out. Your motives are being purified. Your reactions are being reprogrammed. Your dependence on external validation is being dismantled. This is why the silence feels intense. Your spirit is detoxing from constant stimulation. The enemy cannot hijack what he cannot locate, and he cannot locate what God has hidden. That is why attacks that used to overwhelm you now dissolve before reaching you. That is why old temptations no longer hook you the same way. That is why you feel strangely calm, even when nothing around you has changed. You are under divine encryption. The loneliness was the price of your security, and the security is the foundation of your victory. God always hides his most valuable assets before he reveals them. Seeds are buried before they break the surface. Weapons are forged in heat before they are wielded. Kings are prepared in obscurity before they are recognized. You are not late. You are not forgotten. You are not behind. You are being secured. When this season lifts, you will re-emerge with clarity, authority, and precision. You will no longer chase connections. Connections will recognize your frequency. You will no longer explain your path. Your results will speak. Until then, remain still in the hiding place. What feels like loneliness is actually divine containment, and what is contained by God cannot be corrupted by the enemy. Point 4, the collapse of the ancestral altars. While you were in this isolated state, something far deeper was unfolding than what your human eyes could perceive. Something far more significant than personal healing or individual discipline. Because what you were truly doing was dismantling the ancient strongholds embedded in your lineage, tearing down invisible structures that had governed your bloodline long before you were born. And for many of you listening now, this is the truth you were never told. You are the breaker in your family, the anomaly, the interruption, the one soul sent to end what everyone else unconsciously carried, and the 1,000 demons you annihilated were never random forces of darkness drifting through your life. They were assigned guardians, stationed watchers, ancient enforcers of generational patterns, spirits of poverty that normalized struggle, spirits of addiction that disguised bondage as coping, spirits of abandonment and divorce that fractured love before it could mature, patterns that had quietly ruled your family tree for 4 generations or more, feeding on repetition, survival, and silence. And when they saw you standing alone, cut off from familiar support, misunderstood by relatives, distanced from friends who could no longer follow your path, they assumed you were exposed, weakened, and ready to fall, because isolation has always been their favorite battlefield. But what they fail to recognize is a spiritual law that has never been broken. When a chosen one stands alone, they never stand unsupported. Because solitude is not absence, it is alignment. And in that alignment, you are backed by the full authority of heaven itself, forces you could not see but could feel pressing around your life, restraining what was meant to destroy you, strengthening what was meant to rise within you. And every time you refuse to repeat the emotional reactions of your parents, every time you chose discipline over escape, clarity over chaos, obedience over impulse, you created a spiritual vacuum. And that vacuum did not weaken you, it exposed them, pulling those ancient demons out of hiding, stripping them of the power they derived from unconscious repetition. And one by one they were dragged into annihilation, not because you fought loudly, not because you proved yourself to anyone, but because you refused to bow to the patterns that demanded your submission. And that refusal became judgment, that resistance became deliverance. And what you felt as exhaustion, loneliness, and pressure was not failure. It was the death rattle of an old cycle that had ruled your bloodline for 1,000 symbolic years, finally realizing it had reached its end. And as you endured silently, something irreversible happened in the spiritual architecture of your family line. Because by standing firm, you didn't just survive, you cleared a path. You rewrote permissions, you removed access, and you secured freedom for the next 7 generations, who will never fully understand why they don't struggle the way others do, why doors open for them, why peace feels natural, why stability is their default. And this is why the battle felt so personal, so relentless, so targeted. Because it was never only about you, it was about your name, your seed, your future. And you redeemed that name not through noise, not through applause, but through endurance, through integrity, through solitary obedience, by the blood of the Lamb and the word of your testimony spoken not to crowds, but to the unseen realm. And now the war that once surrounded you has collapsed inward. The strongholds are broken, the contracts are nullified. And what remains is the quiet authority of someone who has walked through isolation and emerged not empty, but crowned, carrying freedom in their spirit and destiny in their silence. Point 5, the tiredness of the triumphant. I know you feel an exhaustion that goes down to the marrow of your bones, and you've been judging yourself for it, thinking you are weak, thinking something is wrong with you, wondering why you don't feel the fire you once had. But I am here to tell you the truth you have not yet allowed yourself to accept. Your tiredness is the evidence of your triumph. You are not burned out, you are poured out. You are spiritually spent because you have just finished a marathon of warfare that would have destroyed 1,000 ordinary men. You were not fighting skirmishes. You were fighting sieges. You were not dealing with surface resistance. You were dismantling ancient strongholds, cycles, and assignments that were never meant to survive your obedience. You are the special forces of the kingdom, trained through pressure, isolation, and endurance, deployed into environments where others could not survive without losing themselves. You have been operating in a high-intensity combat zone in the spirit, and now your physical body is finally catching up to the reality of the victory your soul has already secured. Do not mistake your fatigue for defeat, because defeat leaves you empty and hopeless. But this tiredness still carries clarity, still carries discernment, and still carries a quiet authority that cannot be shaken. When a warrior returns from a battle where they took down 1,000 foes, they do not return dancing and shouting. They return scarred, breathless, silent, and needing rest, because their nervous system is recalibrating to peace after living too long in alert. That is where you are now. This is not collapse, this is decompression, this is not weakness. This is recovery. This is your Sabbath season, not as a suggestion, but as a command wrapped in compassion. The Lord is calling you to come away, not because you failed, but because the assignment is complete and the annihilation is finished. You do not rest to prepare for the war. You rest because the war is over. The demons that were chasing you in January will not be seen in December. The patterns that tried to drain you, distract you, derail you, and distort your identity have lost jurisdiction over your future. The entities that were haunting your dreams, stirring anxiety in your chest and whispering confusion into your quiet moments, have been silenced forever, not temporarily restrained, but stripped of access. That is why the noise has stopped. That is why the chaos feels distant. That is why the silence feels heavy instead of empty. You are tired because you are a victor, and your system is learning how to live without constant resistance. Peace feels unfamiliar when you've lived in warfare for too long, but do not sabotage it by calling it boredom or numbness. This peace is earned. This peace is the inheritance of endurance. Very soon you will notice that things no longer provoke you the way they used to, that conversations no longer drain you, that your sleep begins to deepen, and that your mind begins to clear without effort. That is not regression. That is restoration. The peace that is about to flood your life will be the direct result of the war you just ended, and it will not require striving to maintain it. Your only assignment now is to rest without guilt, to breathe without fear, and to trust that what was sent to destroy you has already been defeated. You are not behind, you are not broken. You are standing at the quiet edge of victory, and everything ahead of you will be built on the ground you just reclaimed. Point 6, the replacement of the tribe. God is now preparing to fill the vacuum of your loneliness with a company of burning ones. And this is not symbolic language meant to comfort you. It is a spiritual law unfolding in real time. The emptiness you felt was not abandonment. It was evacuation. Before heaven installs anything new, it removes everything incompatible. Now that the 1,000 demons have been cleared out, there is finally room for the 1,000 angels, the destiny helpers, the fire carriers, and the God-ordained connections to enter your story without resistance. You could not meet them in your previous state because you were still carrying residue from an old season, old survival habits, old compromises, and old emotional armor that was once necessary but would now contaminate what God is sending. Isolation was not punishment. It was purification. Fire does not destroy gold. It reveals it. And the loneliness you endured burned away everything that could not survive where you are going. That is why this next season will feel different. The people entering your life will not ask you to dim your light, soften your intensity, or apologize for your depth. They will provoke growth instead of comfort, expansion instead of validation, and alignment instead of attachment. These are people who can look at your scars and see credentials rather than damage, who understand that what tried to break you actually forged you. You will no longer feel the need to explain why you move differently, think deeply, or carry a weight others cannot articulate, because they carry the same fire and recognize it instantly. This is why the loneliness had to last longer than you expected. It was a divine filter. It ensured that only those with a kingdom assignment, not emotional curiosity, could locate you. Anyone who needed you to stay small would have been destroyed by the atmosphere you now carry. Anyone attracted to dysfunction would have been exposed by your clarity. So God kept you hidden until your frequency matched your future. What is approaching you now is not random friendship, not surface-level companionship, but strategic alignment. These connections are already in motion, being nudged, positioned, and drawn toward you by the light of the victory you just won in the unseen. You may feel subtle shifts, unexpected conversations, sudden invitations, unforced recognition. But understand this: nothing will feel rushed, forced, or chaotic. The transition will be seamless because you already did the hardest work alone. You cleared the atmosphere. You broke agreements with isolation. You learned how to stand without applause. Now you are moving from a season of me and God into a season of the army of God. And armies do not form in noise. They assemble after discipline. This is why you were trained in silence. This is why you learned discernment through absence. This is why betrayal did not kill you, but refined you. What comes next will not drain you. It will multiply you. You are no longer waiting to belong. You are becoming a place others belong to. And when these burning ones arrive, you will recognize them, not by excitement, but by resonance. There will be peace, strength, and a sense of familiarity that feels ancient, as if your spirits already knew each other before your paths crossed. The loneliness did its job. The fire finished its work. The door is open. The room is ready. And heaven is now sending reinforcements. Point 7, the mantle of the destroyer. From this day forward, you carry a new reputation in the spirit realm. You are known as a destroyer of legions, not because you sought battle, but because you refused to abandon your post when the night grew long and the silence grew heavy. The enemy no longer studies you as prey. He calculates you as a hazard, an unpredictable force forged in isolation. Sharpened by pressure and sealed by endurance, you have proven something rare and terrifying to darkness: that you can stand alone without applause, without reassurance, without relief, and still prevail. You have proven that your faith was never circumstantial, never transactional, never dependent on comfort or companionship. It was rooted, it was immovable, and because of this you now walk with legal authority, the kind that is earned, not granted. The authority to liberate others trapped in their own seasons of loneliness, confusion, and spiritual paralysis. The anointed path was never about rewards alone. It was about transformation. It was about becoming a living portal through which deliverance can flow. What you survived privately has qualified you publicly. Because you annihilated 1,000 demons within your own mind, your own emotions, and your own unseen battles, you now carry the anointing of the breaker, not just for yourself, but for your city, your church, and your nation. Your pain did not disappear, it was transmuted. Your wounds did not vanish, they became weapons. Your isolation was not wasted. It was converted into influence that speaks without words. You are the chosen one, and the fire you carry is no longer seasonal or situational. It is a permanent fixture of your identity. You cannot return to who you were now, and the darkness cannot operate the way it once did, because something irreversible happened the moment you chose to stay in the fight, when quitting would have been easier. As we close this prophetic transmission, I want you to take a deep breath and feel the shift in the air. The heavy weight that was on your shoulders was the spirit of the enemy trying to hold on as he was being evicted. He is gone now. 1,000 have fallen at your side, and 10,000 at your right hand, but it has not come nigh thee. You are standing in the clearing. You are the survivor of the secret war. You are the champion of the hidden place. The Lord is proud of you. The heavens are applauding your persistence. Your season of hiddenness is transitioning into a season of high visibility fruitfulness, but you will always carry the lessons of the dark. You are protected, you are powerful, and you are never, ever alone. If you receive this word, if you feel the fire of the Holy Spirit confirming that your loneliness was a shield and your struggle was a slaughter of the enemy, then do not remain silent. Seal this word in the physical realm. Go to the comments right now and declare your identity before heaven and earth. Type, "I am chosen," and let the sound of your conviction echo through the corridors of eternity. Subscribe to this channel to stay aligned with the frequency of the anointed path, and share this with another warrior who is currently in the heat of their 1,000-demon battle. Your victory is complete. Shalom